being created under the new LTP. So that's a further resource which is enabling them to help large projects with private sector developers. And we are hoping that in the short to medium term, we'll be able to use that capacity to backfill some of these parts of this project as well. So as of today, we haven't got a lot of capacity, but I imagine it's going to grow relatively quickly along with the strategy, and we should be able to fulfill what we need to fulfill to keep the projects moving along.
So, Tony, in terms of the strategy, detailing that, and part of this, coming back to Dom's point initially, will be to the terms of reference as well, because the earlier discussion tended to concentrate on keeping within quite a narrow terms of reference, and I'd be interested in those comments on that.
Look, I'd say regardless of the terms of reference, the work that needs to be done remains the same. The certainty, the speed and the momentum of what that is done, excluding capacity, will come down to what the terms of reference of the committee are.
Are there any comments of Jade or Tony?
I got one, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Councillor Holst.
Right from the start, we hear a comment about the feeling of frustration about some of the members of this committee. Well, this has only aggravated it a bit more. It seems to be we're spending so much time to get a strategy going that we're actually doing nothing else. And it's taken forever. This is now 2 years of this term gone. We've only got 12 months to go. And, you know, if we continue working on strategy, that'll be another year gone with nothing delivered for anyone. So we need to focus a bit more on what we can do, how we're going to do it, and when are we going to do it, and get on with some things.
Dom, you'd like to make a comment?
It's certainly acknowledging Councillor Holst's comment, and I guess going back to when Council considered the prospectus, this was something that the committee had requested in terms of a strategy specific to the commercial property portfolio. It doesn't necessarily stop us from progressing those other work streams, and as we've outlined, we have been doing that, which is why we've got this cart before the horse situation. We're committed to obviously building the capacity and delivering on a program, but if the committee does want to proceed with that strategy, we can do that alongside it.
Ken, did you want to make a comment, or was I've just got your head there? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Greg. It's yeah. One, my connectivity is not that great, so people are cutting in and out. But two, I did hear what Phil just said. It is very frustrating that 2 years in we're yet to sort of really get any traction. But I hear also that, you know, we need a strategy and we want a strategy. So I suppose we must go through this now, bearing in mind that we're keen for action. I think right now we've got this in front of us. We should work through it, and then we can talk and get into the meat of the matter. Maybe some of that other agenda carries some of that with it. So I'm happy to carry on at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, then can you continue on with the presentation as it relates to the strategy?
Sure. If Jade could bring up that slide again, please, or the strategy slide. So look, firstly, just to pick up on the points raised by both Councillor Cooper and Councillor House, 100% agree with your comments. We have been working on actions to make these properties investment ready, and we have been dealing with developers along the way. So those portions of work are still going on. And what we want you to, well, we'd like to share with you that this is a circular process, and we are not that's why we've developed some other parts like the guideline, the property prospectus, and we've been starting to review the property policy. The strategy, I guess, at the end of the day, is the number one feedback we got is, why are we doing this? So why would we acquire, or why would we dispose of a property? And that's what we think the strategy will do at an upper level. At the operational level, we'll be developing a series of strategic action plans for each of the individual sites so that we can make them development ready and also have a clear understanding of why we want to acquire or dispose of them. We want to base our objectives for the strategy around the key tikanga of the organisation as a whole. So we're looking at having an overlying objectives and principles that will cover off things like atawhaitanga, for example. So we want to create a sustainable commercial property strategy and portfolio. So we want to grow our strategy, we grow our portfolio, and we want to increase the value of that. We want to form strong relationships with the private sector and use those relationships to drive these development opportunities as well. So that's the whanaungatanga aspect of it. And we're already seeing that coming to fruition with some of the projects we've been working on in recent times. If we look at the Dent Street property, for example, we're now having a number of developers approach us directly and wanting to work with council and form strong relationships. And I guess finally, picking up on Graham Kerr's comments from earlier committee meetings, we want to increase everybody's value and drive value across the whole of the commercial sector of Whangarei. So that's the manaakitanga aspect of it. We want to make sure that everybody can increase their values and their properties. And as a result, obviously, that's good for our whole communities because that's going to raise our rate take, among other things. I guess as an example, and this is a really low bar and low hanging fruit, but our commercial property portfolio in the last 12 months has increased in value by $20 million by doing very little. If we can get this strategy to work, and with the help of the committee, we should be able to drive that value to a much higher level. And that's got to be good for all the ratepayers in the community. And I guess if we look at what success would look like, it would be seeing a revitalised commercial area within Whangarei. It would be seeing more development, more people in there. It would be seeing new businesses starting up, and it would be seeing our private sector sending strong messages that we're doing the right thing.
Tony, the other aspect, I suppose, is looking at where property fits within the other planning that's taking place in the central city and central city plan, but also looking at the precinct plans and saying there needs to be a real concerted effort to look at commercial property to be able to achieve that wider direction that's set out within those plans. So it's not just isolation of commercial property, but it within a context to be able to achieve more of a place-making approach.
Yeah, I guess it's probably through Chair, it's probably recognising that the levers we have as an organisation are limited, but they are very powerful. So we own very little commercial property within the CBD, but we do set down the rules and the guidelines about what can happen there, and then we can enable our staff to work to achieve that business success for those individuals. I think what was really a really good example of what happened last year, or early parts of this year, was the work that the Inner City Spearhead Group did, and that engagement with the private sector and the subsequent development of the draft business case and toolkit for inner city living has provided some really good framework to carry on working through. And I think we're going to see some momentum around that. We're also seeing the things like there has been a shift. There is a downside to decentralisation of government departments with, Ministry of Justice, Whangarei, and all those people moving to regions and stealing our staff. The upside is they're taking office space and commercial space within the CBD. And there's probably about another 150 office workers within the CBD today than there was 18 months ago. So despite the fact we're seeing empty commercial buildings still, they are being reoccupied, and that's going to increase those other aspects of our precinct plans.
Are there any questions or comments for Tony?
No, I just think yep, keep on moving, Greg. It sounds good so far, so let's keep going.
Okay, Tony, do you want to? Councillor Hulse.
Yes, just that report that Tony mentioned about the inner city working group, the spearhead group. I haven't read a report from them, so that'll be foreign to me because I haven't read any of that.
Through the chairs, I guess the working group was a sunrise sunset group. We did some initial work around with engaging with property owners within the CBD. We've then engaged the property group to develop a business case and a business toolkit for repurposing commercial buildings for inner city living. That's in its draft form now, and we're looking to bring that to full council, probably later this month or early next month at the very latest.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, why I bring it up is because there's a lot of talk about inner city housing and et cetera, but shouldn't that discussion be had before we get too formalised when we bring it back to council? Because we keep putting hurdles in front of everything. The whole idea of a council is to remove hurdles so we can actually streamline the system.
My understanding of the inner city living spearhead output was more to develop a toolkit to enable those things to happen.
Sorry, I can't respond because I've been offline with an electrician, so I've just come into the conversation. So as a member of the inner city spearhead group, I'm not quite sure what I've missed, but that's why I'm not responding.
I would respond, but I've got my hand up, but nobody's noticing. Am I not on the screen?
You're there, Shelley.
Well, I was kind of hoping that I might have been, but nobody's responding to me.
Greg, you're muted. I think Councillor Innes has been muted. He's been trying to talk.
No. There you go, Shelley. I can see you now. Yep.
Thank you. I was just going to respond. Tricia's just joined us as well, and I know Simon's on there too. Everything that the Spearhead Group has come back through council via the reports from the two Tonys, and the main focus of our work was to get the toolkit operating so that council would be working with the developers in the city centre to develop what they needed to develop rather than council being the developer itself. Because as soon as we sell commercial property, that comes back to full council, where we have obviously a very divided council on simply every topic that comes through. So the Spearhead's direction was to try and find a way to help the market drive itself. And that has been reported through council on a number of occasions. My apologies if some councillors have missed that.
Dom.
I might be sticking my neck out slightly here, but just wondering, picking up on the last 3 points of discussion around the Spearhead Group, that work stream, around the need to be doing something, to be moving forward, and then I guess linking that back into a bit of the the potential divide and the difference on issues. I guess what we're suggesting, what we're really seeking is to pick up all of this work and to potentially do a review of obviously the strategy side of it, but also the terms of reference of this committee to look at, well, how do we get clear direction to move these things along quickly? And if it's through this committee, what does that look like? And it might be worth maybe going to the end of the presentation and then coming back once you've actually looked at the terms of reference and we've had some discussion around what that could look like, recognising that we may not get very far in a Teams environment because it's pretty hard to get meaningful feedback in here.
Dom, I think it would be good to go to the terms of reference and have a look at those and then come back for further discussion. But I pick up your point about Teams environment. It's fairly difficult trying to chair a meeting through it.
So I've only got literally 2 more slides. It's pretty straightforward. Picking up on that point of the Teams environment, we toiled with the idea of opening it up for discussion, trying to keep a blank slate and trying to get the feedback. That probably wasn't going to be possible in this environment, so we have gone one step further and sort of put up some suggested ideas. And I guess we'll go through it and we can come back to these. The idea again is to look at this committee and what the terms of reference could be, and ultimately then pick up on all of those threads of discussion of how do we keep the program moving, how do we get quick responsive governance input to that, and then what does that look like in terms of where the committee could focus. So as a starter for 10, and recognising that might not be what you're ultimately seeking, but this is about seeking your feedback before going to a briefing of broader council and getting that mandate from council as such. Looked at a potential governance role around monitoring and improving the performance of the commercial portfolio more broadly. So when you look at your terms of reference currently, all you on paper are empowered by council to do is basically implement those decisions that are either made through the long-term plan or via a council decision around this disposal and acquisition of property. And where that leaves us and where it leaves you is reports coming back that are either outside of your terms of reference or dealing with a range of operational matters which are also outside of your terms of reference. What we're proposing is to broaden that around the performance of the commercial portfolio as a whole. And again, this is for discussion. And then looking at governance oversight of commercial property outcomes, linking into those policies, plans and strategies. We tried to break it into 3 potential areas here and give some examples on what that could look like. So if you look at a direction setting component, a planning and alignment component, and a monitoring and reporting component, I'll go through each of them in due course. Where we're really going and what we're putting out there for discussion or complete alternatives is how do we link the policies, the planning frameworks up and make a one-stop shop that brings together these work streams? Where does council provide governance direction and what's this committee's role? You know, I like the cat, Councillor Cupful, versus the council direction. And really almost separating that out into, okay, the committee's role could be around commercial property plans, policies and strategies. So that recognises that we've got this broader framework. We've got 2020 flowing through into city centre planning. We've got precinct plans. We will have, and it will come back to this committee and to council, an inner city toolkit. But the things we've discussed with you today are potential for a commercial property strategy, and Tony's touched on that today. There is potential to look at individual properties and what are the outcomes we want for those within the portfolio. A review of the property policy, which is our historical policy, which I don't think has been reviewed in any substantive way since about 2015. Those property guidelines that which you've already received, and potentially kicking off that property prospectus. And if the committee and council had an appetite to do so, the bulk of the work has been done on that. We did get pushback and feedback from council saying, look, why are we doing this without a broader strategy? But we could speed that up and get to market a lot quicker on that. Then the final one we've put on the bottom is pretty much the direction, the full scope of your current terms of reference, which is implementing decisions on the acquisition and disposal of the property. So just reiterating, this is about direction to staff and then recommendations to council is the way we've framed it at this stage. Again, for discussion. Flipping that into the planning side of things, really looking at a broader gambit for the committee, again, subject to your feedback and that of council, around governance oversight for the portfolio. And picking up on, I think, a point I've heard discussed 2 or 3 times already today, that identification of opportunities and potential recommendations that align to that broader strategic planning framework. So the city centre planning, for example, and the associated precinct plans. Also put in there something around a periodic review of investment and governance structures for the commercial property portfolio. So just making sure we've got our settings right as we go forward. Finally, looking at, and this obviously forms a bit of a circle, once you start monitoring, you go back to the direction setting, but looking at a monitoring and reporting component. Again, it relates to the property portfolio and really giving it the gambit to receive those operational reports and updates, but also to receive and basically provide governance accountability around the performance of the commercial property portfolio. One line I put in the bottom, which we'll reiterate, is making sure that there's regular reporting back to council. So if there is an appetite from yourselves and council as a whole to review the terms of reference, making sure that everyone's singing from the same songbook, everyone's got the same information, and you as a committee and us as staff have a clear mandate to bring things back, get direction, and just get on with it. So this is the starter for 10. We do have a sequence here of what are the things we're working on, work plans, and there's nothing new in there. Where do you want to go with a commercial property related strategy? And then ultimately, what would be the terms of reference that would allow that to happen? Because at the moment, it is limited to implementing the disposal and acquisition of properties. And really, there's limited teeth within that to move things forward. So I'm straight down the line and throwing that out for, I guess, feedback and discussion, and we can step back through the other parts of the presentation as well if there's broader questions.
Dom, I feel a key part of the commercial property committee really has to be involved in setting, involved in the precinct plans and looking at the commercial property portfolio as a way to implement and encourage the development of those plans. And it seems to me that the current terms of reference don't really enable that, and it's just trying to get it in a framework that can actually help set direction and provide quite a strong tool to enable that to happen, but also out of that increase the value of our commercial property portfolio as well, both in terms of capital value, but also in terms of return on investment where that's in place. Shelley, yeah.
Seems to me that the problem with the terms of reference with the property group is that the whole reason for it was so that the committee could make a quick decision over selling a piece of property. And because of that, the terms of reference have been so restricted that the property group actually can't do anything. So perhaps that's where we need to relook. I realise that the minute you take a decision back to full council, it's thrown all over the place and generally the baby out with the bathwater. But that is what the problem is. In order to be able to have the mandate to make a decision on behalf of council, the terms of reference have to be too tight to actually be able to take any action, in my view.
Phil.
Yeah, I just want to echo Shelley's words. So I think she's right on it there. you know, I've got the terms of reference up here in the screen, other screen here, and it's got the key responsibility, and it refers to properties specifically identified in council's long-term plan. It goes on, and the next one's exactly the same. We took those last couple of words away and allow the key responsibility the purchase and disposal of commercial properties, full stop. The purchase and disposal of commercial properties by authorised by council, full stop. And you know, like, we need the freedom to manoeuvre around here, because otherwise we're employing a lot of staff and then we're just holding them in the office without any outcomes. But I think we definitely got to change those terms of reference.
Dom?
Again, sticking my neck out a wee bit here, the terms of reference, you know, it's a difficult situation in terms of the Local Government Act limits council's ability to delegate decisions on disposal of land, acquisition of land, unless they're in a long-term plan. So there's this real constraint we've got posed, which is why we've gone something that gives you a bit of a broader brief. And it's why you've initially got a terms of reference that are framed around implementing the decisions or where the property's in the long-term plan.
To me, I feel that's being a bit pedantic, because we've got to make a change, but we haven't been able to progress anything. So changes are needed, and they needed to happen really quick, but we haven't got anything across the line yet.
So if we talk about getting something across the line, that would really come to focus on the prospectus, does it, Dom?
I mean, certainly that's a potential avenue to go to the market. So obviously there's other RFPs and proposals that are going out, but that provides the whole portfolio and prospectus to go to the market and test the market on properties that council's got an appetite to do that with.
Ken, would you, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The connectivity out here is really bad, so people are chopping it out. Secondly, over the lunch break, I found, I was talking to my father who's in hospital, things aren't so good, so I might have to leave with your permission, Greg, and go around and see my mother. Should be okay, but anyway, things aren't so good there. Thirdly, getting back to feedback about the in terms of reference, I would also like to see something in there that enables us to look outside the silo of the individual property and take into account, I'd like that formalised so that we can, because often there is a strategy, we're going to develop the strategy, links in with all these other city plans and so on and so forth, and I would like to see that formalised. It will have a bearing other than the straight commercial value or the straight value, monetary value of the property, I guess. So I don't know if that makes sense, Dom, but is it something that we could capture, please?
Yeah, Dom, I would, in terms of the terms of reference, I think there the purpose as well goes beyond the long-term plan, and it looks at the integration of the council's commercial property portfolio with planning documents, just picking up on earlier comments. So it becomes a technique to influence development and then follow through in the action. And it sounds like the new position for Mike's role is one that will enable that to happen more. So, Cheryl, yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And getting this commercial property committee set up in the first place was a big step for council. This is the first time we've done it. This term has been disrupted, obviously through COVID and what have you, twice now. And just looking at the agenda item around the terms of reference, the recommendations that staff are seeking feedback from the committee, clearly that this is the opportunity for committee members to have their input into that. I guess it's a little difficult to judge success or otherwise because there haven't really been any property transactions to outside of the LTP process, because I do note that the terms of reference for this particular agenda does enable the committee to enter into both purchase and sale of properties after approval of council. So I don't think there are too many impediments. If something came up, it should really have come to attention of council, and we just give it then to the commercial property committee to follow through and bring in that aspect of being nimble, which is what we were hoping would be achieved with a smaller committee with a delegation based on that. So I hear the frustration and I completely understand it, but I think getting to this point was a big hurdle anyway. And I'd be interested in hearing back from other committee members, Stuart and Graham, if they've got any suggestions for a direction as well. But I also see Gavin's got something to say. I'll hand back to you, Greg.
Gavin, if you want to comment.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sitting here with my knees up and icing, so putting the screen off. I just want to say that I don't want to repeat what everybody else has said, but I'm wholeheartedly agreeing with the other members of the committee about the frustration, and so I'm not going to bother repeating what everybody said, but I do agree. But I'm sitting here with my knees up.
Graham, would you like to comment?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think its process is the part that's missing. I think what council has done is you've set up a committee of 5 councillors or how many of it is that you've entrusted to go and flesh out the property things to bring forward to a council with a recommendation. What I think is not happening for whatever reason is we're having the formal meetings every 2 months, but there needs to be the next level down, as in some informal working with the staff to be able to go, okay, so what does this look like? What have we got here? How are we going to do this? Is there anybody else involved or whatever it is? But things tend to be, I find after a couple of years here, they're getting presented as a fait accompli, where there should be working further down with the councillors or the committee, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a big meeting like this, which will flesh things out. And I think there's no point pursuing a project that is not politically going to wash. And the councillors in there will know whether, well, actually, yes, we could get this through. Well, this is good for the city and our plans and where we want to go. But we've got to get that fleshing out going, because that's actually where all the good stuff happens as far as making things happen. But otherwise it comes along here, oh yeah, okay, and then it goes back and it's another 2 months. So I think it's process more than we can put plans and strategic things and all that, but it's getting down and making stuff happen.
Stuart, do you have any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think really it's about building momentum here as well, because we've got to, beginning to identify opportunities within the council's portfolio, and we really need to drive these and start bringing back multiple opportunities. Obviously, sort of some of these first ones are some really good developments potentially, but I think in some ways, quite rightly, the council's been using these as pilots, sort of test cases, to monitor how they go, and really just sort of build on that success. So I think, in fairness, it needs a bit more time to gradually build momentum here.
Picking up on your comments, Dom, is it something that what we need to do is have a good briefing, a good working session, and work through and start to get the detail within this documentation that will give us the momentum prior to going along to a council briefing?
So certainly pick up on the broader comments. I guess picking up on, I think it was Graham's comment around process and getting on with things. We do have things, I mean, what we're looking at here is the broader terms of reference for this committee, and whether you've got an appetite to go beyond what you've currently got, which is basically finalising acquisition and disposal. But we do have work streams where we can pick them straight up and come. The prospectus was one that got to that line, and we go, well, do we want to go to the market? The feedback we previously had is, well, we shouldn't be going to the market without a strategy around these for commercial property. So we are getting slightly conflicting messages here, I guess, but I'm hearing loud and clear that we just want to get on with it. But I do think there is an element of, again, going back to that political mandate, the terms of reference you currently got, where do you want those to go? Because at the moment, they're not focused on the broader integration of planning documents and the jumping outside of those silos, which are two things that I just heard in the discussion. And I don't know that a team's environment is the best place to land this, or that we're going to get there today, to be blunt. But we will, and Tony has already locked in monthly sessions rather than going to the 2 monthly or periodically, so that we can start progressing these things.
My thought, Dom, is really like the discussion that we've had today. You're right, so constrained in a team's environment, but there have been points raised that you'll be able to pick up, and within the next month, I think, if we could have a working session within the council chamber, that we're able to start to fine tune a little bit more, because what we have here are bits of work all over, like it's strategic, it's operational. It's pretty difficult in this environment to try and put all that together. But one thing I'm picking up from this discussion is that the terms of reference definitely has to be looked at. And that has to provide the Commercial Property Committee with a lot more ability to be able to influence.
So maybe that's Dom. Wait.
Kelly.
I might be repeating what Dom was about to say here, but it seems to me that the Commercial Property Group was dead keen to be able to sell without going back, or buy without going back to council for further discussion. But also, the group saw themselves doing the work that the Spearhead Group was doing, which was outside the terms of reference. So somewhere it seems to me that those two need to be aligned. Whether it means that the ability to sell property without going back to council needs to be amended, which it probably does, and then the terms of reference need to be amended so that the property group can do a bit more of the type of work that the Spearhead Group was doing, because it was actually making some traction.
Yeah. Do you want to comment on that, Dom? Because it seems to me that starting to pull together really in terms of the overall approach of the committee?
So I've heard two things. One is in a number of forms, there's a desire to review the terms of reference. And if I had to briefly summarise the points you discussed, being involved in precinct plans, increasing value of the portfolio, needing a change to make a change and go beyond the requirements of the Local Government Act potentially. But we may have issues there. And Councillor Cooper talking about getting out of silos and going beyond monetary value and defining strategy outcomes, which is what the strategy piece of work will do. So what are the outcomes we want beyond just pure commercial? I think there's a work stream alongside that to go, well, actually, where are the runs on the board? So there's terms of reference and the runs on the board, and we're definitely hearing an appetite for a session back in chambers to look at that in a less formal environment. So two work streams, terms of reference, and potentially, I would say, bring back the prospectus and going, what can we actually move forward?
Yeah, I think bringing back the prospectus is definitely a component of that. The views of others on the committee, has Dom picked that up in terms of carrying that forward? Sounds like oh, Vince, would you like to comment?
I just wanted to ask a question, if that's okay, Councillor Innes. Because the way I read everything was that property sales that this group, commercial property group committee, could actually deal with was stuff which was actually approved by full council. Is that not the case?
So yes, that is the case, all within a long-term plan, and that's specified in the Local Government Act.
Yeah, so technically every property actually already has to be deemed or dealt by a full council, and then it's up to this commercial property committee to actually do the final sale or purchase of that. Is that correct?
Yes, as the terms of reference stand.
So why is the committee wanting to change that terms of reference on that respect?
So the staff recommendation, what we put in front of you, isn't to change that respect, but we're asking if there's a broader space that the committee wants to be in.
And I think, Dom, the broader space there is saying that it goes beyond the long-term plan. When council endorses something like the city centre plan or a precinct plan, then there's a role then for the commercial property committee to be able to get in and be able to either sell or purchase property within that context.
Councillor Innes, Mr. Chairman, doesn't that then put the commercial property committee actually in a very dangerous situation? Because not even though a councillor is supposed to read all the documentation that they've got in front of them, a piece of property might be included in that documentation which might say it's okay to get rid of. The commercial property committee go ahead and straight ahead and get rid of that property, whereas it really should have come back to full council for clarification before, because at the moment what you're doing is you're allowing the staff to make a decision and then to bypass full council. Is that really what you're trying to do here?
No, and in terms of that component of the precinct plan, it would be using commercial property as a means to implement the intended direction, and that would be signed off by council. So that would then delegate that responsibility then through to the commercial property committee. But Dom, you might like to comment.
So just to reiterate, we're really looking at where the committee may want to give some feedback about broadening the terms of reference, given the frustrations and the feedback we've had, for a broader discussion with council. Again, the Local Government Act is quite clear that council has to make the decision on a disposal or acquisition of property, or it has to be in the LTP. But picking up on the feedback and the points that have been discussed today, there could be, and this is a point for discussion of the committee and with council, a broader role of the committee in integrating, identifying opportunities around that strategic planning framework, so the city centre plans, for example, and taking any recommendations back to council if it's a recommendation that we acquire or dispose of land. It's where does the committee want the space to be and where does council want it to be?
Mr. Chairman, the reason why I was raising the concern is the inner city plans and things like actually don't highlight car parking as an essential item for the inner city. So I'm consciously aware that land which has been deemed as car parking for the city can actually be sold without actually looking after the full needs, and its parking is just one aspect which I'm concerned about for our district and for our inner city here.
So in developing those plans, there needs to be a full input in terms of the desired or intended direction, but also it needs to list the techniques of enabling it to happen. And of course, the long-term plan is one aspect in terms of funding, but there are also other provisions that can be provided for through the district plan as well. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might be reading too much into this, or more than there is, but the deafening silence is telling me that there's a lot of concern out there. You know, I'm pretty staunch on where we go with our commercial property. It is a vital revenue stream, and it just is a concern of mine that if we are not, how will I word this? If we're not 100% focused, somewhere along the line, we're going to sell off commercial property and either not reinvest or reinvest wrongly, and we're going to lose revenue. And I could be completely wrong here, but I suspect that is one of the issues that we have, and that is probably the main reason that the terms of reference on this group have been so tight. It's how we work around that and ensure that we don't slip up, because I, for one, oh God, I would hate to think that we made a wrong move and sold something and didn't replace that revenue somewhere else along the path. It's just business sense. Yeah, I'll leave it with you.
Graham, would you like to comment on that, or Stuart on Simon's comment there?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, look, Simon, I think you're right, but I think things are getting quite, you know, they're certainly getting fleshed out. You know, back further with the staff and that. I haven't seen anything that in my short time that you know, that I think we're not going off in tangents. You know, maybe we could, but I don't see that. In fact, I think the whole organisation is very, very conservative. I really can't comment too much on the process, Greg, because you know, I don't go that far back. But from what I see in the time involved, I think, you know, we're struggling to get momentum to get to those points. So you know, I'm sure there's checks and balances in place. Well, I hope there is.
If I could just add to that, Mr. Chairman, it's, for me, I hear a lot I don't always let on, But when you hear councillors saying we need to get into this and get rid of some of this property and get some money in and we could sell this off, and man, like the warning bells are just ringing that loud in my head. It's damn near deafening. And that's what I hear, and it worries me. And yeah, we should all be concerned that there are guys and girls on our council that think this way. But it just really irks me.
I think you can rest assured, Simon, that these processes that we've got to follow ensure that those aspects don't eventuate. But Stuart, do you have any comments? Otherwise, then I'll go back to yourself, Dom, and we'll finish this item on the agenda, and we'll get a motion on the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say there that just to reassure the councillor, my understanding is that the existing commercial property policy does provide for reinvestment using the funds from commercial property sales, so that there's strict policies that money is to be earmarked for reinvestment.
So Dom or Tony, I'm in your hands in terms of have you got enough feedback on this item, and we move on to the next one?
I think we've got as much as we can meaningfully get in this forum. So we'll obviously take those key points I've summarised before and some of the concerns that councillors have raised, and we'll bring them back to the committee.
Okay. So Carolyn, in terms of the recommendations on page 4.1, can I have a mover of that, please?
Before you do, could I just suggest that it be amended to, so 1 as written, note that the Commercial Property Committee notes the operational work plan Commercial Property 2021 and request staff note the feedback on the strategic direction for the commercial property portfolio and changes to committee terms of reference prior to a briefing with council.
Good, thank you. Would someone like to move that? I'll move it if I can have a seconder. Yep, thank you, Shelley. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you.
Councillor Innes, just before you go on to the next item, do you think you could confirm the minutes? That's item 3.1, just before you go on to 4.2. Thank you.
That's fine. Can I have someone to move those minutes as a true and correct record, please? Thank you, Councillor Holst. Second, Councillor Deming. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried.
Just to check, Mr. Chairman, the first vote I will abstain from. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you're not on the committee, Simon.
More's the pity.
Greg, your mouse seems to be moving,
Yep.
but I can't hear anything.
Yep, it's sorry. If we move on to the draft commercial property guidelines.
I can pick that one up. So as Dom talked about this morning, I was able to get into the office this morning just to get the marked up document because it was left there before level 4. So here is a short summary of the changes. There weren't actually a huge amount of changes for this document. So up to the committee if you would like me to. I don't have the official version 2 of the guidelines that are changed for you today, but I can talk you through the changes that I have made. So if the committee would like me to proceed with that.
I think it would be good to go through those.
Okay, wonderful. So summary of changes. So there was, in the guidelines, there was a property acquisition and disposal process. I might actually flick my screen over so that you can see. I believe that we have the guideline documents here somewhere. I'll just pop them up on my screen so you can see what I'm talking to. Oh, yep, here we go. All right. Okay. I'll share that screen with you all. Okay, so this is the version that hasn't been changed, but I'll just talk you through the changes that you had recommended last time, which I have made in a version 2. So under step 2 of the acquisition and disposal assessment process, there was a request for the change to be made around separating out the fail for land acquisition or disposal. So last time the feedback was to have land acquisition separated from the disposal scorecard, because one would have a score of more than 49% and one would have a score of less, depending on if you wanted to dispose or acquire of a property. So those changes have been made. Obviously not reflected in this document. I'm just trying to talk you through what changes were requested. The next change was for the decision tree governance. Excuse my scrolling. So if you can see my mouse down here under the Property Committee authorised to act, the resolution instructing staff to complete negotiations and return the transaction for final approval by council. So this is part of the process of making sure that the decision making is robust and that council has the final say as per the LGA. So there was a request there to add in that staff would, if they were requested by the committee, to develop up the agreements to be drafted, and then from there it would be to complete the negotiations with council and committee, and then the final approval done by council. The next change to be made was under the essential criteria for land disposal scorecard. The scores on this one were to be changed around. So 10 was to be a 1, and then the 1 down the bottom was to be a 10, just to reflect that it was a disposal scorecard. And then on the acquisition scorecard, under the return on investment section, I believe this was Councillor Cooper who had talked about this, and he had mentioned it earlier as well, was adding in here, we had on the left-hand side under return on investment, economic return or strategic outcomes, and it was requested that we, under each of the numbers, that strategic outcomes was also added. So we had covered off, say for example, for number 5, the financial return of the property is equal or exceeds a fair market return, or it delivers expected returns in line with council policies. So the additional wording that would be added to that is strategic outcomes. So it would read something along the lines of, or it delivers expected returns and strategic outcomes in line with council policies. So instead of return on investment being a purely economic return, it would also have strategic outcomes in there as well. And those were the changes that were requested in the last committee meeting. Are there any questions on those?
Any questions at all? Any comments? Otherwise, I'll come back to the recommendations and get a mover and a seconder for those.
Councillor Innes, there is no recommendation there. I've just been chatting with Dominic offline just to see if he can craft something up fairly quickly. If you just give us a minute.
So this one came through, obviously we had the guideline in the council offices. So it was only picked up this morning. So there wasn't the time to send through a supplementary item. So we really have two options ahead of us. There are minor changes as a result of your feedback in July, or we can bring the item back to October with the marked up changes, which is probably the appropriate thing to do. So you've got time to review it and then ultimately endorse it.
I think the latter, Dom, would be appropriate. Is there any others got comment on that?
You just
Phil.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, where did my mic go? The last part of that the chart we just saw that we had up, it just showed that we could sell properties 90 to 100% of the value, and that we always seem to be underselling of key properties. And why don't we just have it as market level? Because a developer could well pay 200% for a property he wants because it adds value to his investment next door or something. Yet we always need to discount those properties. I can't understand why council discounts such a big thing. So, if you're doing a major development, you've got to get hold of the land. And if we're selling the land, why wouldn't we get a premium for it?
Yeah. And in terms of that, there's also the context where sometimes there's other benefits of public good provided through a sale of property. So that's also part of the consideration. Right. Well, if we can then move on to the confidential agenda. If there's nothing else to raise, Dom or Tony or Jade.
Through the chair, just if I could just make one comment around the discussions to date, please. We've had Councillor Cooper saying that we should be looking at the wider benefits rather than just the monetary return on a property. And I think that's what we're trying to do across a range of these things, both with our strategy and also with our guidelines. We've had Councillor Reid speak about wholesaling or wholesale sale of all our property. I've been in the organisation now for probably just over 2.5 years. We have sold virtually no commercial property other than leasehold property along south of Port Road, which has always been part of our strategy to do anyway. I think if we look at the percentage of our $70-odd million of commercial property within our portfolio at present, the properties that this committee are likely to discuss are likely to account for less than 5% of that property. And then there is obviously a requirement that sales goes back into our property reinvestment reserve for developments in the future. So certainly, whatever the terms of reference end up being, the scope of properties we're looking at are probably relatively small within the wider picture of our whole portfolio. Thank you.
Yeah, good, thank you. If we can then move on to the confidential agenda. Can I have someone move that we exclude the public, please?
I'm happy to move that, and I presume the recording will stop as well.